You were the gifted kid. Reading at a college level in fourth grade, acing tests without even opening a textbook. Everyone told you how much potential you had, but look at you now. You are an adult, staring at a single unanswered email for 3 days, completely paralyzed by anxiety, entirely unable to start a simple task until the absolute last second. Let us be brutally honest for a moment. Society lied to you. Being a gifted kid was not a blessing. Statistically, it was a curse that completely destroyed your distress tolerance. If you are a chronically burnt out adult who feels like a walking disappointment, despite having a supposedly high intelligence quotient, I have bad news for you. Average people are beating you in life right now because they actually know how to execute. But here is the good news: you are not actually lazy. According to clinical neuroscience, your brain was literally miswired for failure. This is the reality of the gifted kid trap. The biggest lie you ever absorbed when you were young was the simple phrase, "You are so smart." It sounds like a compliment, but psychologically, it was a cage. Let us look at the brutal contrast here. At 10 years old, you were a prodigy. At 30 years old, you are exhausted just trying to exist. You carry this silent shame every single day, this heavy guilt that you are wasting your potential, that you peaked in middle school, and that somehow, somewhere along the way, you broke. You did not break. Your biological hardware is doing exactly what it was trained to do. When you succeed without trying during your developmental phases, your brain never forms the neural pathways required for grit or resilience. You were praised for who you were, not what you did. So now, the moment you face a task that requires actual effort, your brain panics. It interprets difficulty as a threat to your entire identity. If you have to try, it means you are no longer the smart kid. So you freeze. Your current procrastination is not a moral failing or a lack of discipline. It is a clinical trauma response designed to protect your fragile ego. You are trapped in an invisible cage built by early childhood validation, and it is time to dismantle it using actual science. Let us talk about your brain chemistry. When you were 7 years old and you finished your math worksheet in 2 minutes while the rest of the class took 30 minutes, what happened? The teacher smiled, handed you a gold star, and called you brilliant. In that exact second, your brain received a massive hit of dopamine. Dopamine is the molecule of reward, the chemical that tells your nervous system to repeat an action. But here is the catastrophic flaw in that specific dopamine loop. You did not get the reward for the process. You did not get it for the struggle, the frustration, or the overcoming of an obstacle. You got the maximum neurochemical reward for absolutely zero friction. Fast forward through your entire childhood. For 10 years or maybe 15 years, your brain was repeatedly bathed in this effortless dopamine. From a neurobiological standpoint, this is a disaster. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to wire and rewire itself based on experience. When an average child struggles with a problem for 2 hours, gets it wrong, tries again, and finally gets it right, their brain literally builds physical neural pathways associated with resilience. They learn on a cellular level that frustration is just the step before success. Your brain never built those pathways. You were running on a psychological cheat code. You never learned how to learn, you only learned how to already know. Then came the psychological poison known as identity-based praise. Clinical psychologist Carol Dweck spent decades studying this exact phenomenon. When adults tell a child you are so smart, they think they are building self-esteem. But what they are actually doing is cementing a fixed mindset. They are tying the child's entire worth to an innate trait that the child did not even earn. You did not choose your genetic intelligence quotient, but suddenly it became your entire personality. Your whole identity was built on being the smartest one in the room. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long term planning, was completely hijacked by this conditioning. Your executive function is supposed to break down massive goals into small steps over several weeks. But because you spent your formative years coasting on sheer cognitive horsepower, your brain never learned how to plan. Why waste energy organizing when you could write an essay the night before and still win? Your nervous system learned to rely entirely on last minute panic as a substitute for discipline. The cortisol spike of a looming deadline became the only chemical strong enough to jumpstart your brain. So, what happens when the cheat code stops working? What happens when you become an adult and suddenly raw intelligence is not enough? You face a project that requires you to focus for 48 hours. You face a problem that you do not instantly understand. For a normal person, this is just a regular Tuesday. For you, it is a psychological earthquake. Because your brain lacks the neural wiring for distress tolerance, the moment you feel confused, your amygdala lights up like a siren. You do not just feel like you are failing a task. You feel like your entire identity is dying. Your subconscious logic tells you, if I have to try hard at this, it means I am not actually a genius. And if I am not a genius, then I am nothing. Effort is no longer a tool for growth. In your mind, effort is the undeniable proof of your own stupidity. The moment things get difficult, your brain assumes you are an imposter who is finally about to be exposed. So instead of leaning into the friction, you completely shut down. You close the laptop, you open social media. You tell yourself you will do it tomorrow when you feel more inspired. But we both know that inspiration is a lie. You tell yourself to avoid the painful reality of having to actually try. You are not waiting for the right mood. You are avoiding the catastrophic ego death of realizing you are just a regular person who has to work hard to get things done. Let us move to the most misunderstood part of your current existence: the perfectionism procrastination loop. I want you to think about the last time you had a major project, maybe something that could genuinely advance your career or change your life. You did not just sit down and start, did you? No. You sat there and visualized the entire process from start to finish in about 3 seconds. In the psychology of intelligence, this is known as complexity awareness. People with an elevated intelligence quotient do not just see step one. They simultaneously process step one, step two, step 50, and every single potential point of failure along the way. Before you even type the first word or make the first phone call, your brain has already constructed a fully rendered simulation of how this could turn into an absolute disaster. You see the nuances, the structural flaws, the variables that other people completely ignore. On the surface, this sounds like a superpower, but in reality, it is a psychological prison. Because your brain is so good at predicting failure, the barrier to entry for any task becomes impossibly high. You tell yourself you are just a perfectionist, that you just have high standards. But let us be completely brutal right now. Your perfectionism has nothing to do with high standards. Your perfectionism is a defense mechanism. It is an emotional shield designed to protect a deeply insecure ego. You are terrified that your absolute best effort will yield an average result. And this brings us to the biggest psychological twist of your entire life. Your procrastination is not laziness. Laziness is a passive state of apathy. Lazy people do not care that they are not doing the work. They are resting and they are enjoying their rest. You are not enjoying your rest. When you procrastinate, you're locked in a state of high functioning panic. Your heart rate is elevated, your cortisol levels are spiking, and you are carrying a crushing weight of guilt for every passing hour you waste. That is not laziness. Clinically speaking, your procrastination is an active trauma response. It is the free state of the fight, flight, or freeze nervous system reaction. Let us unpack the dark logic of this trauma response. Your entire identity is built on being the smart person. So, what happens if you give 100% of your effort? You spend 40 hours working on something and it still fails. If you try your absolute hardest and still fail, the only logical conclusion left is that you are not actually smart. That thought is so psychologically devastating that your brain will do anything to avoid it. So it creates a loophole. If you wait until the last possible second, if you start the assignment 3 hours before the deadline, you have built in an automatic excuse. If the result is bad, you can tell yourself, well, I only worked on it for 3 hours. If I had given it 2 weeks, it would have been perfect. You purposefully sabotage your own timeline to protect your ego. You would rather society label you as lazy, unmotivated, or disorganized than risk the possibility of being exposed as stupid. Lazy is a behavioral problem that can be fixed. Stupid is a genetic sentence that you cannot escape. Your brain calculates this risk every single day. It decides that not trying is the safest possible choice. You sit on the couch, staring at the wall for hours, entirely paralyzed by the gap between your internal vision of perfection and your external ability to execute it. You are not procrastinating because you do not care. You are procrastinating because you care so much that the potential of falling short feels like literal death to your nervous system. This is the loop. You hold on to the fantasy of your untapped potential because as long as it remains untapped, it remains perfect. We need to talk about the most toxic word in your vocabulary: potential. You have spent your entire life being told you have so much potential. You wear it like a badge of honor, but let me give you the brutal truth. Potential is not a compliment. Potential is just a polite word for things you have not done yet. The world does not care about what is inside your head. The market, your career, your relationships, they do not run on hypothetical genius. They run on output. You are sitting around waiting for your external reality to match your internal intellect, but you are completely crippled by something called executive dysfunction. Executive dysfunction is not a character flaw, it is a neurological traffic jam in your prefrontal cortex. When you try to start a task, your brain does not just see step one, it sees step one, step two, and every possible catastrophic failure all the way to step 100. Your working memory gets completely flooded. You cannot prioritize, you cannot sequence, and you cannot initiate action. So you sit there, completely paralyzed, thinking that if you just think about it a little harder, the friction will go away. It will not. You are trying to use raw intelligence to solve a problem that requires biological discipline. And this leads us to the second massive twist of your life: the bitter pill that you have been refusing to swallow. Look around you. Look at the people you went to school with, the ones who had to study for 5 hours just to get a B minus, the ones you secretly thought you were vastly smarter than. They are passing you by. They are getting the promotions, building the businesses, living the lives you thought you were destined for. It drives you crazy, does it not? You look at them and think, how are they winning? They do not even understand the nuance of the problem. But that is exactly why they are winning. They do not suffer from the paralysis of complexity. They do not overthink the structural flaws of the system. They just wake up and execute. They have an average intelligence quotient, but they have maximum execution capability. When they have an idea, they do not spend 3 weeks running mental simulations to optimize it perfectly. They just build a terrible, flawed first draft in 2 days. Then they fix it. Then they launch it. You need to understand the fundamental math of reality. An average idea executed 100 times will always mathematically destroy a genius idea that stays in your head. Dumb, repetitive action creates a compounding effect that raw intelligence can never match. The people you think are less capable than you are, outperforming you because they are not afraid of looking stupid. They are not protecting a fragile, gifted kid ego. They expect it to be hard. They expect to fail. Their nervous systems are completely comfortable with the friction that sends you into a spiraling panic. You are losing the game because you are playing the wrong game. You are still playing the middle school game of who has the highest test score in a controlled environment. The real world is an uncontrolled environment. The real world rewards completion, not perfection. As long as you refuse to do the messy, imperfect, average work because you think it is beneath your intellectual level, you will continue to watch people with half your talent live the life that you were supposed to have. Potential is an illusion. Execution is the only metric of reality. We need to fix this, and we need to do it using actual clinical psychology. This is the 3-step framework to reboot a highly intelligent, completely paralyzed brain. Step 1 is the most painful. You have to actively kill the genius identity. You must permanently detach your fundamental self-worth from your intelligence quotient. Right now, every single task feels like a life or death test of your intellect. You need to accept that you are no longer the prodigy in the room. You are just a normal adult with a job to do. When you stop trying to protect the fragile illusion of your own brilliance, failing a task stops feeling like a biological threat to your survival. Step 2 is embracing the B- execution. Your perfectionism is just a trauma response, keeping your executive function frozen. To break the paralysis, you have to force your nervous system to tolerate producing mediocre output. I want you to sit down and intentionally write a terrible first draft. Give yourself exactly 30 minutes to do a B- job. Do not edit. Do not overthink the structure. Just put the garbage on the page. When you finally realize that the world does not end when you produce something totally average, the psychological friction completely disappears. Momentum is entirely built on low friction, imperfect action. You can always fix a bad piece of work, but you cannot edit a blank document. Step 3 is dopamine reprogramming. For the last 20 years, your brain has demanded a massive neurochemical reward for absolutely zero effort. You have to rewire your baseline. You do this by actively attaching your dopamine release to the friction itself, not the final result. When you sit down and focus for 45 minutes without picking up your phone or opening a new tab, that is the victory. It does not matter if what you produced in those 45 minutes is completely unusable. The goal is not a perfect final product. The goal is teaching your prefrontal cortex that sustained, painful effort is the actual reward. You are retraining your biological hardware to crave the struggle instead of constantly running away from it.